Should you sell your Bitcoin to protect yourself from the results of the core versus knots debate? In this video, I want to go into this in depth. Let's get started. My personal decision in this matter is that I'm not going to sell my Bitcoin. I'm just going to hold on to it because there is nothing better. What else are you going to hold? If you sell your Bitcoin, are you going to hold dollars? Dollars are guaranteed to lose value. On the other hand, with Bitcoin, it's possible that it never ever goes to zero. I think it's very likely that it won't ever go to zero because Bitcoin is the best form of money in the world. The core versus knots debate may end up with some inappropriate pictures on the Bitcoin blockchain, but I personally think that node operators are going to make the move to Bitcoin knots. They're going to change from Bitcoin core to Bitcoin knots because Bitcoin knots is mostly Bitcoin core. The main difference between Bitcoin core and Bitcoin knots is that with Bitcoin knots, you are going to continue to be able to filter out transactions that include more than 80 bytes of op return data. With Bitcoin core, it seems like in future versions, they may be removing the ability to filter transactions. So I personally think that the world is going to move to a Bitcoin implementation that allows users to filter out transactions that they don't want on their computers. The way that Bitcoin has always worked is that the people who are making the decisions generally end up making the right decision because people are working for themselves. This is just how consensus works. Do you think that most people want CSAM, CP, inappropriate images on their computers? I don't. I think that because they don't want these things on their computers, they're going to move from Bitcoin Core to Bitcoin Knots, or they're not going to upgrade their nodes from Bitcoin Core 29 to Bitcoin Core 30. I was doing a little bit more digging on Bitcoin Core, and you can see here Bitcoin Core 29.1 released on September 4th sets the default minimum relay fee to 100 Satoshis per 1,000 VBytes, 0.1 sats per VByte, a 90% reduction in the previous default rate of 1 sat per VByte. So what they did here was they set a default that's different from what was historically accepted with Bitcoin. So they basically reduced fees by 90%. I'm not sure if people don't like this, but it seems like a lot of people haven't updated to Bitcoin Core 29.1. You can see here 29.0 is at 16.83%. Only 2.91% of people have updated to Bitcoin Core 29.1. And this is with a relatively minor change. So I don't know what this could be a result of, but it's possible that people maybe don't trust Bitcoin Core as much as they did before. You can see here that the most recent version of Core 29.1.0 is under the adoption of Core 25.0, which was released on May 26th, 2023. So Core 29.1 is still lagging behind a version of Bitcoin Core that was released 2 years ago. Instead, it seems like people are updating to Bitcoin Knots. You can see here Bitcoin Knots from September 3rd, 2025 has 13.47% of all Bitcoin nodes. On the other hand, Core 29.1, which was released just one day later, only has 2.91% of all nodes. I think that this is showing you that people don't want to be bullied by Bitcoin Core. Bitcoin Core is going ahead with a change that it seems like most people don't like. So I don't plan to sell my Bitcoin before this happens. I think that before this happens, a lot of people will be on Knots, and Knots adoption is growing and it will continue to grow. You can see the line here, the dark green. It's skyrocketing. On the other hand, Bitcoin Core adoption, this is the yellow right here, Bitcoin Core adoption seems to be falling. So people are not starting nodes with Bitcoin Core. And I understand that it's possible that some of these could be on Amazon web services. They could just be, people could just be spinning up multiple nodes that aren't real. And I think that most people will go to Bitcoin Knots before Core 30 is released. You can see here that Bitcoin Core is now only 74.53% of total nodes on the Bitcoin network. So my point here is that Bitcoin Core could be attacking Bitcoin, but I think that people will do what's right. I think most people are honest, and most of the nodes on the Bitcoin network are honest nodes, and they're going to do what prevents this kind of degenerate material from going onto the Bitcoin network, because Bitcoin is a multi generational asset. If these pictures go on the Bitcoin network once, then Bitcoin is going to be tainted forever. So if you're on Bitcoin Core version 29 right now, if you update to Core version 30, you're allowing people, the degenerates of the world, to upload pictures potentially of children in unfortunate positions. You're allowing them and you're relaying their transactions. You're allowing them to put these pictures on the Bitcoin blockchain. And I think, like I said, most people are rational. They don't want this to happen. Most people are thinking from a perspective of trying to make the world a better place. They don't want to destroy the world, but then there are other people who do want to destroy the world and they do want to see Bitcoin fail. So I still think that Bitcoin is going to survive because it's still the best asset in the world. It's not like that changes. I personally think, though, that by the time Core 30 comes up, most people won't update to Core 30, just like they didn't update to Core 29.1. If Bitcoin Core loses their trust in the community, things are going to change completely. And it's possible that instead of Bitcoin Core being the reference implementation of Bitcoin, it becomes Bitcoin Knots. And I wanted to just give you a quick explanation of what the reference implementation is, what that means. The reference implementation of Bitcoin is Bitcoin Core, the original and authoritative software that serves as the definitive guide for how the Bitcoin network and its technologies should work. Developed by Satoshi Nakamoto, this open source project provides a full node, wallet, and block validation engine, which other implementations can use as a gold standard to ensure their software adheres to the same Bitcoin rules and specifications. So in the past, people used Bitcoin Core to refer to, and that was the bar for quality. If Bitcoin Core makes this change and if it allows people to upload whatever they want to on the Bitcoin network, I think most people are going to say that they're not opting into this and they may switch to Bitcoin Knots, because Bitcoin Knots, like I said before, is 99.9% Bitcoin Core. It's just that the people who maintain it have changed. The developers are still working on the same project. So, like I said before, I think people are generally going to do the right thing. I think people are going to do whatever they can to keep the network sovereign. Knowing that this is even a problem is probably the biggest issue that we have. If you're able to spread the word, I think that may be the best thing that you can do. But eventually, I do think that people will move to Bitcoin Knots or they'll stay on Bitcoin Core 29. So Bitcoin is still going to $1 million. It's still going to $10 million. It's still going to $100 million, because my assumption is that people will do the right thing. They're going to run nodes. They're going to protect Bitcoin. They're going to make sure that Bitcoin can't be used to store degenerate pictures and things that are inappropriate in majority of the world. Based on how consensus works, I think most people don't want those pictures on the Bitcoin network. A lot of wealthy people own Bitcoin and they know that if Bitcoin has this kind of exposure and it becomes this file database for degenerates all around the world, then the value of their asset is going to decrease significantly. And I don't think that they want this. So they're going to encourage miners to change over to Bitcoin Knots because that's the best way to go. Bitcoin Core seems to be trying to find ways to stimulate Bitcoin adoption and Bitcoin usage in order to favor the miners so that the miners can receive bigger and bigger transaction fees. But what they're doing is they're sacrificing the long term for Bitcoin. Like I said, Bitcoin is a multi generational asset. We don't want pictures that are inappropriate to be on this asset that's going to be around for hundreds of years. If it does happen, then it will taint the network. But like I said before, most people won't want that. They don't want Bitcoin to store arbitrary images that they don't want on their computers. So they're going to change from Bitcoin Core to Bitcoin Knots. Bitcoin is still the only asset in the world that has a truly finite supply. It's the only asset in the world that doesn't require a management team. It's the only asset in the world that doesn't require rental payments. Everything else is way worse as a store of value than Bitcoin. The people on the Bitcoin Not side want to keep Bitcoin only as money, while the people on the Bitcoin Core side seem to want to add additional uses. And the scary part here is that it seems like some of the Bitcoin Core developers who are trying to push this through are invested in companies that need this change to happen. So, is this happening because the people who are pushing this through want Bitcoin to be improved, or are they doing this because of some other incentive? I think that all of this is very, very sketchy. And even if you don't want to switch to Bitcoin Not because you've heard that there's only one maintainer, so that person can be blackmailed, of course, that's true. Stay on Bitcoin Core 29.1. Don't switch to Bitcoin 30. Over the next few months, I think we're going to see that Bitcoin Knots adoption explodes, and whatever the majority of nodes are running is probably going to be what miners want to use as well. Before Bitcoin Core 30 is released sometime in October, I do believe that 50 to 60% of nodes are probably going to be running Bitcoin Knots to avoid the issues that come with running Bitcoin Core 30 and having an unlimited space for op return inputs. So don't panic, don't sell your Bitcoin because this is happening. I think that the end goal is still the same. Bitcoiners still want the same thing. It's just one small group of people who want to make this change and really change how Bitcoin works. I think there are probably going to be a lot of very wealthy people who step in and start talking more about Bitcoin Knots. And that's probably going to lead to more adoption of Bitcoin Knots. And it'll probably take Bitcoin Core out of the reference implementation status. If Bitcoin Knots gets to 50 to 60% of all nodes, then I think that it'll probably raise some questions with very wealthy people who ask whether Bitcoin Core can be trusted anymore and whether it should be the reference implementation that they're running. As this information spreads and more miners figure out what the potential outcome of running Bitcoin Core 30 could be, we're going to see more and more hash power getting dedicated to Bitcoin Knots directly. A lot of this is definitely speculation, but my point here is that I don't plan to sell my Bitcoin. I plan to hold through all of this. If Bitcoin goes to zero, then I'll go to zero with it. I think a lot of this is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. The move from Bitcoin Core being the reference implementation to Bitcoin Knots is probably going to be smooth. So hold on to your Bitcoin because nothing else is as great as this asset. Everything else has additional risk. The US dollar is guaranteed to lose value. So why would you ever want to hold that? The stock market is extremely risky compared to Bitcoin. And owning rental properties is basically like having a second job. Think of this as all of the people who want to hurt Bitcoin, making it obvious to the public, and the Bitcoin network basically eliminating them from having any power over it. Once the trust in certain developers is gone, you're going to see that it never comes back, and Bitcoin is no longer being threatened. So, no, I don't plan to sell my Bitcoin. I plan to hold on to it until it goes to zero or until it goes to billions and billions of dollars. I stand by all of the estimations that I've made in the last few years. I do still think that Bitcoin is going to unimaginable numbers within your lifetime.